station anywhere. We are LA Talk Radio at latalkradio.com.
You're listening to Fouche Way with Brandon Fouche, right here on LA Talk Radio.
Well, hello, and welcome to the Fouche Way radio show, live every Thursday at 1 o'clock p.m., sponsored by a nonprofit organization called Canine Hope for Improvement Program, where we hope to improve the quality of our dogs' lives by moving towards a no-kill society. The number here is 818-602-4929. Well, good afternoon, and I'd like to start the show by saying whenever you have a success with what you are doing with your dog when it is relating to aggression, no matter how small, you must realize how important that is, especially if it was something that you were unable to do in the past. It must be looked at as though it is a monumental step. And a lot of people will make success with their dogs and then say, well, I wish that I could do this, or I wish that I would be able to do this over there. And I want you to understand that I don't want you to look at this moment that you got your success as though it's a stepping stone to the next moment, so that you don't pay attention to what you should be doing now. That's very important. You know, there's a gentleman that works for me. His name is Leroy, and he has a tattoo, and the tattoo says, "It is what it is." And every time he looks at it, he's got to be reminded that it is what it is. And that can help keep him in the present moment, because that's where dogs live. We have the ability to think of tomorrow. They worry about tomorrow when it comes. That's one of the many differences with us and dogs. So if you are successful on any level relating to aggression, focus on it. What makes it work and why? And become a master at it. I'm asking you to do this. Why? Because that's part of the Fouche way. And so our first guest is Diana, and I'm following up with her dog named Luca, and we want to hear, she's made some new developments, and I want our listeners to hear that. Diana, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. How are you, Brandon?
I'm doing just great. I mean, I'm really excited to talk to you because you are really moving forward, and I want our listeners to know about that. I mean, the last time we talked, Luca had a problem. The reason that you came to me, he attacked a small dog at your mom's house. Mm-hmm. And you've been trying to get help with him for some time now. And, you've come to me. We've talked a number of times on the phone. I've got to say I'm very happy that you do keep in touch with me about what's going on. But you did something. You called me and you did something. And I want our listeners to know. Can you tell us what you did?
Sure. My sister had lives in San Luis Obispo and had an emergency. She had to come down here, and she has an old Min Pin, and she didn't want to leave him behind because he's too old and he needs to be cared for. So, she knows Luca's history, and she knows what's going on with him, but I think she also has been hearing all of the hard work that both he and I have been, putting into getting him to be at a point where, he can be around other dogs. So she left her dog with me, and when I went to get the dog, he was in his little crate, and on the way home to bringing him to my house, I was thinking to myself, should I call Brandon? Mm-hmm. But I was just a little bit doubted myself, and I thought, no, he's been teaching me what to do. I think I can figure this one out myself. So I just knew that overall the point was I would have to let Luca know that there's no way in heck that he was even allowed to even for 1 second look at Dante in any kind of aggressive way.
Exactly.
So I was going to make sure to get that point across to him.
Okay.
And I was able to do that without having to call you first,
Right.
which I'm very happy about, because you have been teaching me, and I have been learning from you. So I hope that makes you happy, because it
absolutely.
doesn't just go in one ear and out the other.
This is a very big step, Diana, because, he attacked a small dog. That's a big fear of yours. And now you're bringing a dog for the first time in your house with Luca. And if you listeners go to the Facebook page, you'll see a picture of Luca and this little guy at their home. And have they been playing at all?
You know what? Luca's tried to spark play with him,
Okay.
but when he's old, and he just kind of sits there. He just looks at Luca like, oh, come on.
Okay, well, that's fine.
But as soon as I see that, I just go over, Luca, he can't play with you. Come on, let's go.
Right.
And listens to me.
But he's tolerating him.
I'm sorry?
He's tolerating the dog.
He is tolerating the dog,
And that's great. How does that make you feel? I mean, our listeners need to know. How do you feel? You brought a dog home. I don't know. This is probably the first time you've done that.
Yeah.
How does that feel?
It makes me feel really good. It makes me feel like there's progress and there's continues to be hope for me and Luca.
Yeah.
So it's an awesome feeling.
Okay. And you're moving forward. You're moving forward.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning. And I want this to apply to you, what I said earlier. I want you to look at this moment. This dog is in your home. He's with Luca.
Mm-hmm.
And you are comfortable with this situation. Okay?
Yeah, I am.
And you're going to move forward. So pay attention to everything that's happening here, why he may be acting this way, the way that you want him to act, and understand that it is you who are creating the environment, the reality for Luca to live in. And you're saying he needs to accept that this new guy is in his home. You don't have to explain to him why. It's just that is what you want. You feel that with everything with inside of you that you project on the outside, and that becomes the body language. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he got that right from the second I brought that dog home. So I'm very happy with that.
This is usually the beginning. And the way this starts is once you're able to do that, you will find that the way that you are going to transcend into the future is that you will start bringing dogs into your home. This is how it works. I didn't tell you this, but you will do it again with another dog, and that's where it will begin for you before you start to have the success that you want on the outside. And I wanted to wait and have you come on for me to tell you that, because it has happened to so many people this very same way.
Yeah, and that really does make me happy. It does, and I'm glad to hear you say that.
Oh yeah, that's what's going to happen. I mean, you'll watch, you'll have you back on, and you'll say, yeah, I brought another dog in, and they're in there playing, and it will begin from there. So I'm so happy for you. You keep in touch. You are a good person to call me all the time, and that's what I want, those little progress. And I want everyone to go.
Thanks so much, Brandon.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah,
and that little picture, I'm going to frame it.
Thank you for always being available to talk to me and to help me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's what I live for, helping those dogs and to help you. You know, this is a relationship. This is a relationship of you and other people that want to become the Fouche way, to make a change, to keep their dogs, to move beyond that fear. And so we'll keep in touch. Thank you, Diana.
It's moving.
Okay.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Bye. Our next caller is Nancy
Bye-bye.
Klein. Nancy Klein is calling in from Palm Springs. Nancy, how are you?
Hey, Brandon. How are you?
Okay, I know you're a little under the weather. You have a little cold. Yeah, but that's okay. It is what it is. And we want to hear about what's going on. I mean, you've been doing the Fouche way. You've got little Pearl that you adopted from the Palm Springs shelter. She's been a new addition to your home. She's been doing great. And you called me the other day, and this is the reason why I say it's important to give me a call, to give me progress, to tell me about what's going on. Can you tell our listeners what you said when you called me?
You know, Brandon, I've been having some problems with walking Pearl, and you know, I've always walked all my dogs on a harness, and I think that's important because I want to be able to walk the dogs and have that relationship to walk them, as opposed to, you know, I'm just not big on using any sort of control, and it certainly isn't the Fouche way or prong collar. I've just never wanted to do that, and I've always, as you know, had my other dogs always walk well on a harness. So I had called you and said I was having some problems with Pearl. She is, you know, while I feel very confident in the home with her, with integrating her as we did together, you know, walking in a new environment or taking her out for a walk was yet another issue. So, you know, I've had quite a bit of issues with Pearl, really, and we, of course, walk on a harness, and a lot of people like to say, oh, well, they pull because they're on a harness, and I think it's the relationship, as we know. And she was just pulling, and it became this sort of, you know, she was playing a game with me to just really pull. And as soon as I got out of the gate, I got out of my front door and closed my gate, you know, she was like a racehorse. So, you know, I called you up and you picked up, and it was later in the evening because I just ended all the walks with the dogs, and you said, go get a long lead. And I said, oh God, I don't have one. You go, oh, go tie 2 leashes together. We're going to do this right now. So, you know, I tied 2 leashes together, and you said, you go out there and you're going to give her a choice, and you're going to give her a consequence and allow her to make a choice and show her you're confident and be in the leader like you are in the house. So I tied the 2 leashes together, and I went out, and Pearl and I began to walk again, and you know, we did exactly what you had said. I gave her a long lead. I allowed her to pull way in front. I gave her a consequence, and she made that decision to come right back to me and then walk behind me several feet. And we walked up and down the street, and we actually saw a cat in doing so, and there was no reaction. So I had her back walking and doing the Fouche way, because I told you that with this new dog that I wanted to start and have a complete dog that's been Fouche to do it the Fouche way. So it was just that one time, and she was back in line, and
it made a difference.
The walks were more enjoyable. You know, it's stressful when you're trying to, you know, keep your dog from pulling. It's very stressful, and it's now much more enjoyable.
Well, yeah, you know, I want to explain this. It's very interesting because you're not new to this. We've talked about things like this. I've talked to you about how to walk the dog, and the only difference is that I have not actually physically touched Pearl. This has all been over the phone. But the more that we talk, because I do a lot of phone consultations, I get a sense of what I'm dealing with, the mindset of the dog that I'm dealing with. And I can sense that the reactivity of Pearl's nervous system, by what you've told me, is high. She's reactive to her environment, okay?
Yes,
that's,
very.
Right. Now, you've got to deal with that differently. That's why the evaluation is so important. There is no one particular way. It's the way based on the personality of the dog, what it has learned, and what it's experiencing genetically. And I want to quickly mention, too, yes, the harnesses are definitely for pulling. The reason that it works that way is because the harness is on the body, and when the pressure is applied against the body, it automatically tells the dog to pull. And that's why she's coming out like a racehorse. But even so, even so, as you mentioned, it's about the relationship. It's how you make the dog feel. And in her case, when she came out with the pressure on her body, it's much like how we work with horses, where we touch them, we can make them move in different directions. And you're talking to the body when the harness is on. And so the dog comes out like that. But once she's there, you give her the consequence. You're dealing with how she's feeling physically about the harness and emotionally about the environment, and you give her a consequence. Now, there are many different ways to stop a dog from pulling, and that's why I'm not giving you any one at this particular time, our listeners, I mean. I'm just telling you. And the thing that I told you based on what you told me about her, it worked instantly. And, I would have told you something different with another one of your dogs,
Yeah, absolutely. And it really, as well, certainly is based on the relationship, too, regarding one of my other dogs, because we've had that issue with one of them in the past, and it was definitely each dog is an individual.
Each dog, right.
So what I think is really important for the listeners to know is that, having a dog is a part of your family, and you're going to have this dog for years, 10 years, 12 years, 14, 15 if you're really lucky. And it's a long time, and it is about the relationship. And one consultation for the initial is really the important thing, because any sort of like tune-up, like what I would call what happened with Pearl, I needed a tune-up, is easily done over the phone.
Right.
And that's really the great thing, that it seems sort of like magic. It's kind of a weird thing. And, until you actually become a part of it, it's hard to wrap your brain around it, and to also understand that after the consultation, that these fixes are so simple, and you kind of think, oh my gosh, this was so simple, but it's not. It's not,
Right.
So that's what I wanted people to know, that it now it is as simple as a phone call. Yeah. And it's just getting back on track and a tune-up, and everybody needs tune-ups.
Right. And how would you, no one would have thought that I would tell you to put this dog on a longer leash. If anything, you would think a shorter leash, trying to keep her behind you. But it's based on what you're telling me. See, there's different techniques for different personality types. As I mentioned in my past show, it's about the type of person you are, the type of dog this is, the learned behavior of that dog, and how that genetic component relates to that learned behavior. So, very important, and I'm glad that you called me, and you do make a habit of calling me for things like that, just to check in, to say something, and you say a little something, and then I'll say, okay, is this something that I got to read the dog, or am I reading the person? And in this case, I'm reading you. And right away I said, look, you got to step it up. You're the queen in the house, but you are being very submissive outside. And can you truthfully say that's what you were feeling? Weak outside?
No, for sure. Absolutely. And I have to tell you, Brandon, we're out in the desert right now. We do have a home at the beach in L.A., and out in the desert, in Los Angeles or at the beach when you're walking your dog, there's very strict laws about being on leash, and it's just very urban. And out in Palm Springs, it's a little bit more spread out, and people have their dogs off leash a lot. So I do walk out, and she, Pearl absolutely reads it with a weakness and a concern, a fear of a loose dog walking up or, out of control. I don't have control of the environment. And she picks up on that. And that's absolutely what happened. And that's why it's important. I need a tune-up. I need to get myself back together and make sure that the relationship with Pearl and I is back on track, because this is we're in it for I've got her another 12 years or so, hopefully.
Right. Well, you've got to own it. You've got to own it. The dog needs to know that you own it, and everything in the sight of the dog and everything that you can see, you must be able to project that you own it. And that's what pack members need to know. And that's what you did the other night, and I'm proud of you, and I want you to continue calling me. And we're going to continue to move with Pearl, okay?
Oh, thank you. Of course, Brandon.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be another issue at some point.
That's okay.
And it's always good to keep on track.
Absolutely. And, I'm going to have you back on about this again, too, because people are watching. They want to know how it's going with Pearl. Okay?
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Our next
All
caller.
right, Brandon.
Yes. Bye-bye. Our next caller is Ryan Tilder. Ryan, how you doing?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Okay, so I'm calling you about Charlie and Siete. Siete was actually a new addition to your home, but we're really talking about Charlie today. And, you've been a client some time now, and I wanted to have you on because I've had a lot of calls about cattle dogs and border collies and, working dogs with biting people or being aggressive to other dogs, because the reactivity of this dog's nervous system is high, and they were bred to think on their own, and they discipline and dominate. That was their job. And I want you to tell our listeners your journey with Charlie and how you got to where you are today, because it's a very unique story that a lot of people need to hear, and it was not an easy journey getting to where you are now. And I want you to tell our listeners, tell us the problems that you were having with Charlie. First of all, how you found out you got Charlie, and then the problems that you were having that led you to me.
Yeah, we had another Australian Shepherd before Charlie. That was my wife's parents' and sister's dog, kind of the family dog growing up. And she passed away in about a month. My wife and I had already been looking for an Australian Shepherd, and about a month after the previous dog passed, we heard about Charlie, went out to a breed-specific rescue and to have a look at him, and my wife fell in love immediately, and we brought him home. And, when we met him, he seemed to interact with all the other dogs at the rescue just fine. He wasn't terribly friendly, but we're used to that with Shepherds. And in the end, we brought him home that day, and because we were used to the previous dog, we had simply assumed that the independence we were used to, the casual, relaxed understanding they could just go, could kind of wander around and do as they pleased, would be perfectly fine. And what we learned was, shortly after getting Charlie home, was that he had a number of bite scars on his head and on his ears, some tears and he had clearly been in a fairly decent dog fight not long before. And on our first walk of the day, or our first walk with him, really, he was very well behaved, but within days, he was lunging at any dog behind any fence. And it got to the point where he was actually starting to damage my wife's shoulder because he was pulling on it so much, pulling on the leash so often, and did actually manage to pop my arm out of the socket once, which, to give you an idea of how easily he could pull.
And you're not a small guy.
But yeah, in the end, he was just very dog aggressive, and what really triggered it for us to go looking for someone, and where we eventually found you, Brandon, was we were behind a house with Charlie, and he was off leash because he seemed to understand basic commands, and he just took off. All of a sudden, around the house, up the driveway, and started chasing a woman who was walking her small dog down the street, and basically immediately was trying to attack the dog, and did wind up putting one small bite on the dog. But unfortunately, that was it. We managed to stop it. But and the woman, our neighbor, has been incredibly understanding. Was because her dog also had aggression issues. And that was, that particular incident stopped. But at that point, we realized that Charlie's issues were out of our control, or beyond our ability to control or our experience. We could train a dog tricks. That's no problem. We had done it with the previous dog and have continued to do so. But dealing with that level of aggression, where he was completely relaxed behind the house, and then suddenly, it was like someone had flipped a switch. He was ready to kill instantly.
Now, how did that affect your relationship with your wife, you, and the dog? I mean, what was that like?
It was beyond frustrating and stressful. I know that every walk, morning, evening, didn't matter what time, well, whenever we would go out with Charlie, it was miserably unpleasant. I dreaded the idea of going for a walk with him, even though I knew he needed the exercise. The idea, the thought of having to go through that, just that kind of a gauntlet every single, once or twice or three times a day was really, really unpleasant. And it was draining. My wife and I, our most common topic of conversation has always been the dogs, but with Charlie at the time, it was mostly kind of, what are we going to do? We had, in the process, before we found you, Brandon, we had seen, and worked with at least 4 trainers, including 2 who told us that there was nothing that could be done about Charlie. He was just useless. And a couple of others who said that he was, he might be a shepherd, but he's not very bright because clearly he doesn't understand his own name or something similar. And it turns out, he's a shepherd. He's very bright, but because he's an Aussie and because they have that independence, he only listens to you if you have food or if you have proven that he should pay attention to you. So, but yeah, it was the relationship with my wife. I would say it was a mildly rough patch. Because we both had the same idea, we were in it together, and we had to find a solution. But and everyone we went to who purely did positive reinforcement, Charlie, he was smart enough to pretend or to do as he was expected to do until my wife or whoever was holding a leash, my wife, the trainer, myself, until they turned away. And then he would, if there's another dog nearby, he'd lunge at them. As soon as, in one instance, literally as soon as the trainer turned her head away to talk to my wife, who was a good 15 feet away, Charlie immediately lunged at this other dog.
Wow.
So,
and that can create a lot of crying nights. As a family.
Yeah, it was exhausting.
Yeah.
Emotionally exhausting. And the one thing we do remember is when we dropped Charlie off with you, there was the apprehension and the anxiety of not having our dog with us. But the big issue was that we didn't have the sense of relief that we wouldn't have to deal with Charlie being essentially, the world's biggest dick, on every walk where he was just ready to start a fight. There was a lot of relief in that. There's kind of we'd seen how the difference in his behavior from an hour, or 3 hours with you during our consultation, and we were stunned because we had never been able to get anywhere near the degree of just calm interaction with other dogs that you had achieved. At best, Charlie was tense. And that would be, on a leash with, standing quite a ways away. With you, he was relaxed. And when we saw that consultation, we realized it's like, okay, that's where we want to be, so we don't have to worry about it.
And, I want to say why. I have a different relationship with each and every one of my dogs, and every dog that walks into my door, I am looking for what type of relationship are we going to have. And first, they have to understand what I represent, from the concept of nature. And Charlie, a very smart dog, he got it. He got it. And this breed is a very intelligent breed. Okay? Intelligent in terms of knowing when to discipline and to dominate. And they just need to know, when it's appropriate. And then we got to know how to bring that out of them so that they can calm themselves down. And I tell us about him now.
Now he is, we jokingly refer to him as the old man of the neighborhood. We got our second dog, Siete, about 15, 18 months after we had Charlie, so maybe 5 or 6 months after he'd gone through rehab with you. I think maybe not even that long. And there was one very bad relapse with Charlie right after we got him, where he attacked and he was trying to kill Siete. There was no doubt about it. You remember when we called you. My wife was actually who treats Charlie as her teddy bear. And he likes it. And it's clear that he enjoys that degree of attention from her. He was perfectly willing to go through my wife and harm her to get at Siete. And it literally took someone, and I'm not exaggerating, hitting him across the butt with a 12-inch cast iron frying pan, spinning him 180 degrees before he broke out of just that, that murderous, kind of red zone where he was going to kill the other dog, and was perfectly happy trying to bite my wife in the process. So, but once from that, Siete basically forced Charlie to play with her. So now they wrestle all the time. He will, because Siete is such a social dog, so it's the complete opposite of Charlie, and because we've had so many neighbors move in and or get dogs in the last 4 or 5 years, Siete has, because of her affinity for puppies, has basically taught a number of them to play. She hangs out with them every day, and Charlie does fine with all of them.
Yeah.
He doesn't, every time he meets a new dog, who, in our yard and only basically in his territory, the rules are pretty simple. It's, my wife is in charge, and then me, and then Charlie.
There we go.
And then as long as the other dogs understand that, once he's made the point that he's the boss, he largely ignores them unless they're really getting out of control and he wants them to calm down. And generally, we'll let him herd like that. Okay. Because he doesn't try to hurt the dogs. He just play. He basically wants to be in control.
Right.
And to the point that if it's dogs he's known for years who play in the yard every day, he'll literally just lay down on the top of the steps and fall asleep. If he doesn't want to wrestle or run, he just doesn't bother because he knows the dogs know the rules.
Yeah.
And that alone is enough to, at this point, finally, is enough to make it, is enough to make Charlie happy. He's, he'll have fun barking at the mail and random things going by, but he doesn't, there's no nervous energy. He really isn't tense. Yeah. He's a perfectly happy dog. So,
well, I just wanted you to come on. I wanted our listeners to hear this, those people that have Australian Shepherds, cattle dogs, and, you've got to be in control, and you've got to know how to be in control. And usually with the cattle dogs, it's not about training. It's about socialization. And if you don't know how to socialize energy, if you don't know how to flow with energy, and you try to restrict that energy with the sit, stay, come, and heal, then you are actually creating it, the stress that leads to aggression. And so I just wanted you to come on to tell our listeners about Charlie and, the things that you've gone through, and, you're happy now, and you got another dog, and, you're moving on. Okay?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the big one is training is great for giving them, or for wearing them down mentally. But that only works when as they learn a new trick, and that can only go for so far. So
that's it.
They know what to do, but they still want to be allowed to do it on their own.
Exactly.
So,
life is about a reality, not a trick, and so that's what we got to learn.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Ron, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Brandon.
You're very welcome.
Have a good one.
You too. Thank you. Our next guest is a gentleman named Don Caffrey. But before we get to Caffrey, I want to say something first. I was watching a movie called The Life of Pi. I don't know if most people have seen it yet. And it made me realize that animals that have made a significant contribution to my life have been more important to me than mainly any of the relationships that I have ever been in. And that's kind of weird when you think about it. I mean, in some way, it's a little embarrassing. I mean, I love my animals because there's no pretense. I mean, they are what they are. But more importantly, what I have realized is that love is more powerful than rationalization. And that is why it's possible for me to say that. Love is more powerful than rationalization. It's what they have allowed me to realize about myself that I am in love with. That's the emotional connection. And so now I'm able to move on to other things to understand in terms of, how love is going to play a part in my life. And the reason I'm actually saying that is because my next caller, a friend of mine named Don Caffrey, has had that kind of love with his dog, and he's had a journey which I would love for our listeners to hear about it. And Don is a trial attorney for hospitals and insurance companies. And he had a dog named Shadow that is now not around. But I want you to hear the story. Don, how are you?
Hello.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Hi. How are you, Brandon?
Fine. I was just
Good
talking.
to talk to you.
Nice talking to you.
It's good for you here. I'm sorry about that buzz.
That's fine.
Somebody's calling me. Well, just ignore it.
Yes, please.
I'm very honored to be on your program and to be able to tell this story about my beloved dog Shadow.
Can you tell us how that name?
From,
Can you tell us how that name came about, Shadow?
yes, I'm going to come to that in a minute.
Okay, go right ahead.
It's a story from Shadow coming into our lives as a little sweet dog, totally ink black, that our daughter called Angel, and she was an angel. And all the way through to her death, caused by animal control needlessly, very unfortunate. She gave us the dog because the dog got bigger and bigger. I believe it was a mixture of Doberman and Lab Retriever, and it was long floppy ears and long legs. When Shadow would walk, it was like watching a ballet dancer, floating along with those slender, graceful, rhythmical steps, and it was beautiful. Anyhow, so she gave us this dog because it got too big for her to keep in her apartment. And when she gave it to us, my wife and I, she said, whenever you look at her, always think of me. And that's kind of dramatic because whenever you look at her, always think of me. And we did until Darnell died. And later, animal control killed our Shadow in spite of the efforts I made that were quite extensive, legal efforts that few other people could mount, and involving the damnedest battle that went clear to the California Supreme Court. In any event, there were three incidents. Wait, I'll answer your questions, Brian.
Yeah, well, no, that's fine. There were three incidents that took place that led Shadow into being impounded with animal control.
That's right.
That ultimately led to her death. Now, you spent 2 years fighting this. And, I was talking to you the other day, and I was trying to remember how we actually met. And for the life of me, I cannot remember how that happened. Do you?
No, I can't. I can remember only that God works in beautiful ways. And I believe I was led to you, but I don't know how.
Right.
And I appreciate it. I just wish it had happened way sooner, and you could have helped me with. But I had a lot of help, though. But nobody could have been like you. The Fouche way, the ideological. I had two other expert dog people as witnesses. You can't believe what I went through. But nobody like you. Anyhow.
Don, I want to say something. By us talking and becoming friends over this period of time, I mean, you've learned a lot of stuff here in terms of now what you can tell people that may be going through the same problems that you went through with Shadow. Because a lot of people see aggression in their dog, and they think that somehow it's going to magically go away when the dog gets older, or it'll just, blow over. And it's important that when you see certain signs, like you did in Shadow, because there's always signs, I'm sure you saw signs of aggression in Shadow, that you've got to get your dog evaluated properly by the right people in order to solve this problem. Otherwise, it's going to get worse, and which is what ended up happening with Shadow. If we have if we have aggression with our dogs and we begin to isolate ourselves with our dogs and we try to do things with them to compensate for not being able to be with dogs, like playing ball and throwing things and giving them toys that look like stuffed animals and things like that. And once we start separating them from this real world and to create one for them, the dog wants nothing more than to be connected to that world again. And every chance and every opportunity that they get, it would be like a magnet to the very thing that's going to get them incarcerated. Okay? And I'm sure you saw that,
I did.
And
let me, if I can butt in a minute, I know your time is probably limited.
Sure, but go ahead.
One very important stretch of time, Shadow was incarcerated in the same jail space at the Animal Control in Long Beach for 2 years. Mm-hmm. 2 years, solid. I went to see her twice a day.
Yes.
For 2 years. And I developed a very unusual relationship with her. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that we prayed together. I truly believe that she communicated with me by nonverbal expression, looking me in the eyes and moving her mouth one way and the other. Mm-hmm. And I looked at her, and would you believe Animal Control wouldn't let me take her out of the cage? Why? They said she's a dangerous animal. Well, I put my fingers through the bars, and she would rub along one side, and then I'd pull my fingers out, and she'd turn around, and I'd get to rub the other side.
Yeah.
I never got to hold her until she was dead. When I saw her at the mortuary, I held her then. It was just awful that I would be, and it had developed. I'm going to start in tears now if I'm not careful.
That's okay.
But it was incredible how I developed such an appreciation for an animal friend like this. She was so amazing those years. When I would come to visit her, I'd get out of my car in the parking lot, and the people at the Animal Control, the guard people there, said the second time my car pulled up, she couldn't see it. Bingo! She's up looking over the top of the fence,
right,
from her cage. And then when I would leave, she'd stay up there looking at me as I'd leave. Anyway, she was an unbelievable personality, and I would sit there on a little camp chair I had and be with her and rub her and talk to her and pray with her. She was a very dramatic personality in my life.
Don, I have such a connection with you. I have a picture of Shadow in my place that I have carried with me for years. I don't know how I got it. I don't know if you gave it to me. I don't remember. But, I had the privilege of seeing that connection that you had with Shadow because I went with you once to Animal Control to see that. And, I've been dealing with dogs for so long that the personal relationship that we develop with them, when I see something special, something unique, I know exactly what I'm looking at. And I know the kind of relationship that you have with Shadow and how you felt and how Shadow felt about you. And I do think that people come together for a reason, especially when it's such a high emotional, stimulant that does it. And you have been a very good friend to me, a very personal friend to me, and we've talked numerous times over the phone. And, you did something very special. You wrote a book. We don't have much time, but you wrote a book about Shadow. And
I started writing down I always write down my experiences. As a trial lawyer, I take notes, of course, and write down everything
sure.
in trial and in my meetings with the witnesses. I collected all these writings and kept going until finally I realized I had to put this in a book before I forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I wrote a book detailing from A to Z, and the last chapter of the book is that I've had the most trouble writing, really, is my forgiveness of the people in animal control. But I, of course, mention you in great detail and with much thankfulness. It was sort of as though God had directed this, because at the end of my ordeal and agony, you came into my life, mm-hmm. and you sort of softened it all. And whether you realize it or not, you softened the terrible blow of those people putting her to sleep, killing Shadow.
Oh,
and I still have it in my mind, hugging and holding her head, and she's dead. First time in 2 years that I've had been allowed to hold my dearly beloved friend.
Don, I feel for you, my friend. That's why I wanted to have you on.
Well, thank you.
I wanted people to hear your story, because when I talk about love, that's what I'm talking about. That's why it's important to help dogs, to rehabilitate them, to educate people on what is absolutely needed. It's imperative that we understand dogs from the concept of how nature intended them to process information if we're going to save their lives. I cannot get that across.
Right. I have a section in the book toward the end where I talk about love, that very sort of thing. And I think that dog made me, for the first time, really understand the term of what love is. And here was love from an animal that can't say the word.
Yes.
But can walk the walk.
Yeah.
And can do all the gestures. I could tell from the look in her eyes, from the movement of her lips, from the swaying and movement of her body. She was expressing not only love, but feeling sorry for me, what I was going through, and not blaming anyone for her predicament, and yet letting me understand she knew what the situation was. She's on death row, and she is saying to me, "Don't worry, I'll see you soon." Shit, I'm sorry to get so, pardon me, hacked up like this, but I feel very strongly, not with anger, but with love for that dog. And I feel that way for every animal. I feel very much, now of course not like this. The intensity of this grew because of my going there twice a day, every day for 2 years. I never missed a single day.
Wow.
And the animal control people were very kind to me. The person who was in charge was just the opposite. But I've decided in writing this book, with malice toward none and charity toward all, I'm not going to be angrily throwing barbs at anyone. I'm just thankful that I had the privilege of having some time in my life with that wonderful creature. And I just wish I'd known about the Fouche way earlier on, and then, but I know now.
Yes.
Which is a blessing.
And with that, Don, I'm going to end the show. And I want to thank all of our guests, and I want to thank you again, Don, for coming on to share your journey with us in Shadow. I'm sure it was definitely appreciated. So thank you very much, Don. You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Tune in next time to the Fouche Way radio show.
You're listening to Fouche Way with Brandon Fouche, right here on LA Talk Radio.